Item 7.4, presentation on Title V regulations, policies for prerequisites, and advisories. Thank you.
For you to say.
Please proceed.
President Malumed and members of the Board of Governors, good morning or good afternoon. Today's agenda item is about providing you information based on your questions and comments at the last Board of Governors meeting on the agenda item concerning a possible change to Section 55003 of Title V. The Chancellor's Office staff and the Academic Senate, as well as many other individuals and organizations throughout the state, have been working very hard over the last 2 months gathering information, listening to constituencies, and studying the research on this very important topic. Our basic concern is the success for students. At a recent Board of Governors meeting, you heard about one of the student success models at Rio College. In addition to that model, we have the Basic Skills Initiative, contextualized learning projects, learning communities, and many other innovative interventions taking place throughout the state. All of them, we hope, are having a positive impact on the future of our students. We continue to search for more ways to provide our students with information and support on how to be a successful student and to get that information out to the 112 colleges in the system. Of course, this is being accomplished in the current decreasing budget climate as well. It is with these thoughts in mind that we have begun to investigate the Title V change that would provide students with better information about their need for better preparation. Dr. Jane Patton, President of the Academic Senate, is here with me today to provide you this information and listen further to your comments and the comments of those who might want to speak on the issue. I'll call your attention, one person who could not be here today but did provide written remarks. Nancy Shulock provided a paper that I think was passed out earlier today. AB 1725 clearly lays out that on such matters, the voice of the Academic Senate should have the primary responsibility for making recommendations in the areas of curriculum and academic standards. So with that said, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Patton and then further for your comments later.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor, President Malumed, Chancellor Scott, and members of the board. Thank you for listening to us. I'm cognizant of the fact that you've been very patient and listening a great deal today, and I apologize that I'm coming at the end of that day. But I think our message is really important, and I hope that you'll be able to give it as much time as possible and ask the questions that we have. When we came to the last Board of Governors meeting with a recommendation, you had questions for us, and we appreciate those questions because it provides us an opportunity to come back and to explain more about what we had in our mind but that we hadn't really put on paper. And we've really thought it through very thoroughly and looked at ways that we can implement in the most appropriate way, but we recognize that we really hadn't done a good job of explaining all of that. So I hope that we'll do a little bit better today. I hope you've had a chance to read the FAQ document that came with your board agenda. And that really answers a lot of the questions that have been raised. But of course, any additional questions we'd love to get from you. Since the last Board of Governors meeting, we have met with college and state level CIOs, CSSOs, CEOs. We attended at Fullerton College a meeting sponsored by the Los Amigos and attended by MALDEF members. And we have listened to a great deal of questions, and we hope that we've been able to answer them. You know, I was thinking about something this morning that I've noticed about our society. Unfortunately, sometimes in the national political arena, there is a tendency to polarize folks and say you're either with us or against us, and that there's one way and it's my way and the other way is the wrong way. And as we talk today, I hope you'll hear the goal at improving student success that I think everyone has, and the goal particularly of helping underrepresented students, which I know is a goal that we all have. So I hope that we can try not to polarize, but rather to see how much common ground we have and find the best solution for our students. I want you to know that the proposal we brought to you in May has already begun to change shape, and so if you have in your mind exactly what was written before, it's actually begun to change. So what we'll bring back to you will be modified, and I'm hoping that folks will not get too stuck on the letter of the recommendations that we brought to you before. I think you will see today that the Legislative Analyst's Office, scholars, and task groups with wide participation have come to the same conclusion, and that is that the status quo is broken and we need to make some improvements if we really want to improve student success. First of all, I wonder if you know a few facts about our colleges. We get students in our classes whose reading levels span from elementary grades on through college level, literally. We have students who are able to take transfer level science courses without first having even basic arithmetic skills. That's the system that we live in today. Students can take a psychology course without being able to do any class research. And the community college courses that we teach that are transfer level really need to be exactly the same as the courses taught at the university. That doesn't mean that we don't provide services and tutoring and help, but the curriculum and the rigor needs to be exactly the same because the course is being taken in lieu of the course at the university. Unfortunately, our students are often not at that level, certainly not if they're reading at the 5th grade level. Did you know that all students must take English composition and meet mathematics competency for any degree or transfer that they're planning to take? And that the prerequisites that are under discussion would actually only be at those levels of courses that they already need to take, and in many cases they would be a level lower than those. If students begin their English and math early, it puts them on the path to success. And there is more and more research to demonstrate that. The Legislative Analyst's Office put out a paper, which some of you have read, called Improving College Readiness of Community College Students. This was in June of 2008. And what the recommendation said is that we should create a strong incentive for students to take required assessments, as well as requiring underprepared community college students to begin addressing their basic skills deficiencies immediately upon enrollment. Having appropriate prerequisites, and I really want to underscore appropriate prerequisites on certain courses, and I really want to underscore certain courses, can really serve to that purpose. One of the reasons for our recommendation to modify the process for prerequisites is that students are truly not prepared for college level work, and therefore they don't succeed in our classes, nor do they reach their academic goals. We know that students enter our colleges, sometimes 70 to 90% of them take the assessment and they are below English or math levels when they enter, but we don't require them to take their basic skills right away, and many do not take an assessment or even speak to a counselor or develop an education plan. And you actually heard one of the students yesterday at the Rice Award say that when he first came to college, he just sort of took whatever random courses. He didn't have a sequence. Nobody told him what the appropriate sequence is, and nobody told him that there are some classes, not a huge number, but some classes that are hard, and that in order to do well, you need to go through a sequence before you get there. Again, I want to underscore not all courses. We have math and English graduation requirements, but students are human beings and they tend to postpone, especially if a class is difficult or challenging for them. Unfortunately, what we have in our system today is a discrepancy between what should happen and what does happen. Let me sort of summarize that for you. What should happen is a student enters our college, goes to a counselor, gets assessment, and develops an education plan, and then enrolls in basic skills courses and any other courses that they would like to, that they are eligible to take. And they would complete math and English before or while taking some of the most difficult transfer courses. But what often happens is they enter the college, they bypass counseling, assessment, and planning, and because of our categorical matriculation funding being slashed, they're not seeing counselors at the level that they really need to. They're not getting that support. So the student tends to enroll in random courses, maybe doesn't really know which ones have requirements of foundational skills in order to be successful. Unfortunately, students drop. They drop classes at a high rate, or they might fail or repeat the course, which wastes their time, the institution's time, and certainly wastes resources. I think the fault is that the college has failed to signal to the students what order they should take courses in, and really the conversation about prerequisites is often about course sequencing. So what is it that actually happens when students take whatever they want whenever they want? I'd like to look at some data, and if you look at the folder that I gave you today, if you turn to the handouts on the right side, handout A, just so you know, is a series of quotes that you can read later that give you some background from a variety of sources. But I'd like to look at handouts B, C, and D for a moment. Handout B is some data from Fullerton College from fall 2001 through spring 2009. And what it does is it talks, first of all, at the very bottom where I put a little parentheses, it says that English 100 is a transfer level composition course. Students' chances to pass certain courses are not good if they've not completed college level English first. However, if they take the English course that's required for transfer and graduation sooner, they will have the writing, research, and critical thinking skills needed in many transfer level courses, for example, American government and biology. So if you look at this chart, you'll see that physical anthropology course, Anthro 101 on the first line, the student success rate, if they've not taken English 100, is 52%. If they have taken English 100, they have a 71% chance of succeeding. And so you can go down this chart on your own and have a look. There are some classes where students have a pretty good chance of success. For example, the American Ethnic Studies course, the students are succeeding at that course at 80% rate, so maybe they could take that class while they're taking English and some other ones, and then save that Anthro course until they have their English taken care of. So this is just some data for you, and you can look at it later and study it. I just wanted you to have that example. And then if you go to handouts C and D, handout C,
Excuse me,
and
excuse
sorry.
me, I'm just stuck. What does EEO ratio stand for?
That has to do with and I'm going to probably ask a researcher. I know Ken Meehan is here. Ken, would you mind answering that? Can I put you on the spot? Ken Meehan is the researcher from Fullerton, and so he can define why researchers look at the EEO ratio and what it says. Sorry, thank you for your willingness.
EEO requires that the ratio between the minority group and the majority group be at least be below 80% in order to treat it as significant. So if you divide the success of those that have not completed English 100 by the success of those that have completed it, you get a ratio. If that's above 80%, then there's not a significant enough difference that they would consider that that's an actionable item. It's the same ratio that they use in employment, looking at employment data, and it's the same standard that we use in the validation of placement test cut scores.
Thank you.
Could I also ask one quick question, and that is success rate? Is that those who are considered not successful either drop or score less than C or
Correct.
D or what?
Correct.
C. Success is A, B, C, or credit in the course.
And if they drop or
Their
they
withdrawal,
score
that's
below
that's non-successful.
C, that's the difference
Correct.
in success. Okay.
Correct.
Good.
Thank
So,
you. Sorry.
and I'm glad you raised that point because I think it raises the issue of disproportionate impact on certain student populations, underrepresented students. We have currently in the status quo disproportionate impact. We are harming some students more than others, and you'll see that in the next couple of handouts as well. In other words, the system is broken, and the requirements that we have for our student equity plans indicate in Title V that we need to remedy any areas where equity is not being addressed. And we would argue that we have some courses in our curriculum where students are failing at a rate that is absolutely unacceptable. So let's look at C and D. These are some data from Antelope Valley College, and they rank order a student's probability of succeeding if they have already taken English 97. English 97 is 2 levels below the college composition course that's required for transfer and degrees. So this is a basic skills course 2 levels below English. So let's look at a couple of examples. If you look at the far right-hand column at the bottom, you will see again Anthro 101. If a student has not completed 2 levels below English, he or she has a 26% chance of passing. Now, I think that is absolutely unacceptable to allow a student and to actually encourage a student to take a class with no prerequisites and then let 3/4 of them fail, I think is a huge disservice.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Just, so this is specific to Antelope Valley?
Right.
Okay, and so can I make an assumption, and I need validation on this, because a course in anthropology at their school might not be the same as a course at another community college.
That's a
Is
good
that
question.
accurate?
Well, it's a good question, and it needs to be explained a little bit because the course numbering is not the same from one college to another. I do think in the case of Anthro, it's probably either the introduction to cultural or introduction to physical anthropology. Those are the most commonly, wouldn't you say those are the most common anthro courses that are offered? And anthropology is one field where colleges usually don't have 10 or 15 different types of courses. They just have maybe, 3 or 4 anthro courses. It's kind of safe to say that this is pretty comparable to most colleges as far as the anthro curriculum would go.
I just want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples, because if we're looking at one college within the whole system, and we're looking at data from them, and we're saying that's broad, I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Okay, so I'm not making a broad statement that this is the case at every college. This is a sample of a college, and we could repeat this at many other colleges, and most researchers have done this. I don't think that we have statewide information that could show exactly the same, but if we did a sampling, colleges would have very similar trends. They would have some courses where students have a pretty high likelihood of passing, and then they would have others where students are dropping like flies. And I think that's safe to say every college could do their own data. Looks like a couple other questions.
Sure. No, that's fine.
Thank you. Jane, could you tell us what is the breakdown of the student population at Antelope Valley?
I don't have that data.
Okay.
My question was whether this was based on multiple semesters. In other words, is it based on 3 or 4 years of course-taking patterns so that the N would be sufficiently large to draw valid conclusions? That's my question.
Yes, I believe it was over a period of time, but I'm sorry, this particular sheet that they sent us did not have that broken down. I mean, I certainly could come back and give you, it certainly is not a one-semester sort of snapshot. It was a spreadsheet that was done by their researcher, and they had developed a very interesting strategy for advising advising students, whether counselors or classroom faculty were advising students. They developed a probability chart that would say, you know, it'd be better if you hold off on this class, but here are a couple other ones that would probably be better for you to take right now.
Right.
And they developed this very clever system of advising at Antelope. But a very important point I want to make in looking at C is how many courses in the left-hand column students have a very good likelihood of passing even if they're 2 levels below English. So one of the accusations that some folks have tried to levy is they've said, oh my gosh, there'll be no other class the students can take if you don't let them take you know, whatever they want. As a matter of fact, there is a huge array of courses that students can take, and there's a very good likelihood they'll be successful while they're taking their basic skills. And then if you look at D.
1 second, did Member
Sorry.
Baca have a question?
Well, you know, just to follow up on these two on C and D, I'd assume that maybe the base is the same, because
Yes.
the significance might be the comparisons from
Correct.
2
That
levels
is
below
true.
to 1 level below, and
Yes,
compare.
they were absolutely comparing those. And so the handout D is if the students are 1 level below English. And I want to tell you that in many cases, faculty are telling us that for some transfer level courses, they wouldn't insist on having completed the English transfer level course, but 1 level below would be sufficient. And I would say that that's the case in many cases. So you can see that the comparison is that if they're 2 levels below in English, in the Anthro 101, they only have a chance of 26% pass rate, whereas it's up to 38% pass rate if they are 1 level below. Now, I brought these data here not to be sweeping, concluding about the entire state, but just as a sampling to give you a taste of the conversations that are being held across the state between campus researchers and the academic senates and the curriculum committees as they are looking at prerequisites across the state. So those are, again, just a bit of a sampling for you. So it's no wonder that students aren't graduating or transferring or reaching their goals, because we have not, in some cases, done an excellent job of communicating with our students. I'd like to turn to a quote that Nancy Shulock put in one of her papers called Rules of the Game. She said that, and she is the researcher at Sac State whose research agenda is community colleges. She said the processes for establishing prerequisites should be modified so that colleges can ensure that students have the necessary skills to succeed in their courses. And that is really why we're here, because we have not been telling students what they need to be successful. And I think you also got a document that Nancy Shulock wrote just in the last week or something. And I think you'll find that to lay out the arguments additionally in a very helpful way. So there are many factors that we've been discussing in the Academic Senate over the last couple of years. For one thing, you've heard this over and over, not enough students are graduating or transferring. You've seen the data, and the agenda for this afternoon, when you're meeting with the school board, does provide some more evidence to the fact that we're not doing everything we really need to do. Now, over the last few years, we've had a series of reform efforts, and you're familiar with all of these. The Basic Skills Initiative has made a really big difference in the state. We're very proud about some of the changes that have been implemented. And we do need to do some reform in this state. Nobody questions it, and the reform needs to be multi-pronged. I appreciated the conversation earlier about multiple pathways. I am personally very much a proponent of multiple pathways. One size does not fit all. The Academic Senate is firmly committed to our multiple missions, and we need to ensure that we have strong multiple missions, and that's why we need a whole lot of reform, not just one sort of strategy. We are now working on statewide assessment, and you've heard a little bit about that from Vice Chancellor Patrick Perry. We think that we're going to make some good progress in having a couple of instruments that if a student takes an assessment at one college and then ends up going to 2 or 3 others, it's possible that if this all works out, they'll be able to take their assessment that they only had to take once and not have to retake it elsewhere. We'll be able to do some good comparisons from college to college as well. We are working on the transfer associate degree, which you heard discussed yesterday under legislation, SB 1440. That is an important piece of reform. It's a move in the right direction. And we also are developing a course identification numbering system so that a student knows if they take this class here, the anthro question that was raised, is it going to be the same at every other college? And with a CID number, we'll be able to say that. Prerequisites is a piece of all of the reform that's necessary. It is not the panacea. It is not the only solution, but it is absolutely one thing that we need to accomplish. And I just want to mention that the first handout you have, gives a series of recommendations from a variety of sources to demonstrate why reform is really needed. For example, the LAO report said a large percentage of students do not overcome their basic skills deficiencies during their time in community colleges. And you've probably also heard that some employers are saying, you know, we get college graduates and we employ them, but you know, they're still lacking skills. Well, if we permit them to take classes when they're not prepared for them, and then if we change the way we teach to accommodate those, and again, I'm talking about the most rigorous high-level courses, the ones in the lower right-hand column, not all the ones on the left-hand column, we are really doing a disservice not only for our students but for our state. In the basic skills as a foundation for student success, and I know a lot of you read the Poppy Copy when it first came out, the Lit Review, it has the following statement. Effective practice A4 says, institutional policies facilitate students' completion of necessary developmental coursework as early as possible in the educational sequence. But sometimes people say, what's the connection between taking basic skills early? How does that relate to prerequisites? Having prerequisites appropriately applied to certain transfer courses signals to students that they should do an assessment early after they come to college, and they should get the support and the skills they need so that when they take all these other classes, they are at college level and are doing the college level work. So that's the connection between those two. Now, one question that's been raised, and it's a very important question, is how will you implement changes to make sure that it's done effectively, deliberately, and thoughtfully? And I guarantee you this was always a part of our plan, but we did not communicate it very well last time to you. These are some recommendations that we will bring to you. We must develop resources for the whole state, for college vice presidents, for faculty in the disciplines, for curriculum committees. And I don't know that it would need to be this extensive, but we need to develop a handbook of recommendations for how to do really good content review, how to do multiple measures, how to ensure that there is not disproportionate impact, and if there is, to fix it. We need to give people a handbook. And that would be the first thing that would be developed. We would provide training across the state, and that could take place by webinars, by our institutes, by the local workshops that we do, both internet and in-person workshops and training is definitely a part of our plan. Local colleges will need to do spreadsheets like you saw today. They'll need to look at their courses, and they'll need to say, which courses are we disproportionately failing our students? Are those ones that really do need prerequisites? And if so, we need to add prerequisites to those courses. At the same time, they need to plan what are the courses that don't really need prerequisites, what are the ones that students can really take any time and be successful. They also need to plan their enrollment management, and I am confident that vice presidents of instruction and college presidents are not going to change so many prerequisites that, oh my gosh, overnight they have to offer 5,000 more sections of basic skills. I don't think anybody is foolish enough to let that sort of thing happen. So each college will have to do the planning that's appropriate for their students and for their curriculum. In that planning, they will select the courses, they will do their enrollment planning, and we also are going to recommend that they submit a plan to the chancellor's office, just like they did with the basic skills money. They developed a strategy, and the chancellor's office received that, and it said, we've thought this through, we've been really careful, and this is what our plan is. We also think there needs to be support provided to the local colleges from the chancellor's office, from the academic senate, from the vice presidents of instruction, et cetera. And eventually there needs to be solid evaluation of any change that's implemented, and any correction needs to be made if it's necessary. So we are convinced that with very careful planning, we can help students to succeed, particularly in those courses where they are, unfortunately, failing at a huge rate. Now, the Board of Governors over the year, and the last thing is that the implementation, we think, should also include a report back to the Board of Governors. After a period of time, we think that you need to know, how did it turn out? Over the years, the Board of Governors has had tremendous support for student success, and I'll just remind you of some of the ways that you have ensured and really tried to push the agenda for student success. If you look in your packet, you will see that handout E and F is a portion of a board agenda from 2007. And these are the minutes, from Board of Governors 2007. And I'd like to just draw your attention to the things that have an arrow next to them. There were discussion, and some of you were here, there were discussions about whether assessment results should be transferable among colleges, and that is actually underway right now, that conversation with Patrick Perry and the committee he's assembled. And also they're dealing with, should there be uniform statewide assessment for all students? That is underway. But the Board of Governors said in 4, should there be required prerequisites for college-level classes that require certain skill levels in reading, writing, or math? The work of the Academic Senate since 2007 has brought us to where we are today as a result of the request from the Board of Governors. And finally, the chancellor, at the very bottom of the page, it says the chancellor is directed to begin the process, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want you to know that the Board of Governors really helped to set the agenda for the path that we're on today. The Board of Governors, of course, is also the starting point for our strategic plan, and the Action Planning Group on Assessment is the group that came to the conclusion that not only should we be doing statewide assessment, but we should also be applying prerequisites as a signal to students that these courses are going to require math or English. The Board of Governors also supported the Academic Senate's recommendation to increase the math and English graduation requirements. And as you know, last fall, the new catalogs, the new students who came in now, need to complete English composition and 1 level below transfer in mathematics. That's our new graduation requirement. And over the years, the Board of Governors is always very supportive about basic skills, and that we've seen that time and time again. We are convinced that if all of the options for student success are implemented, including prerequisites, we can truly make a difference. And I'd like to conclude with sort of a summary of what students really need to get from us. Students need to take the right courses at the right time. We need to sequence our courses appropriately. They do need to take basic skills early. They need to succeed in all of their courses rather than failing a lot of them or needing to repeat them multiple times. They need to avoid dropping. They need to get clear information about course rigor and the expectations. They need counseling, support, tutoring, etc. They need to get the same level of instruction in transfer courses as is provided at the universities. And they need to enroll in classes with classmates who are at a similar readiness level to succeed. And ultimately, of course, our students need to graduate. They need to earn their certificates or transfer. When 70 to 90% of our students assess at basic skills levels, if they are not given the support they need, they will drop out, they will not reach their goals, and we will fail them. To do nothing about this achievement gap is really not an option. We hope that you understand a little bit more about prerequisites and recognize that prerequisite reform is just one piece of the overall reform that we need to have in community colleges. And I would be happy to answer any other questions at this point.
Well, here, I'm going to take a few board comments, and then we'll do the public and come back to the board. Vice President Himmelstein, and then Member Price.
Yes, Jane and Barry, just real quick, because I know we're pressed for time. Following up on Member Perez, we do or do not have a system-wide analysis similar to what you did with Antelope Valley and Fullerton.
I'm not aware. No, the researcher in the room says no, that has not been done.
Okay, that would be helpful. And then two, just a clarifying question regarding here, and maybe this is for you, Steve, I'm not sure, but in reading this, the Board of Governors, if it takes action, will allow local districts to set prerequisites, or are we?
No, local.
I mean, can't local districts do that now?
The process is what most people would refer to as onerous. The process is prohibitive. There are very, very few courses in the state where there have been prerequisites applied, where they are actually needed, and it requires us to fail a lot of students in order to demonstrate that. So as a result, there are very few classes that have them.
But Board of Governors action will do what?
The Board of well, it depends on what the final recommendation says, but if we just take the general principle, it would permit local faculty, and of course it has to go to their board for approval, but would approve local discipline faculty to apply prerequisites based on a rigorous content review of the course without having to do lengthy statistical validation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and when we come back with a presentation, we'll really flesh that out and make that very clear.
Thank you.
I'm going to let Board Member Price speak because she has to step out for an interview.
Okay. My question is, what's going to be done to increase the number of basic skill courses to meet these prerequisites, and also what's going to be done to improve the pass rate in these basic skills classes?
Excellent questions, both of them. We know that our basic skills instruction can be improved. In many cases, students are taking courses that they don't need to take an entire semester course. They would do fine with a summer bridge program or with a 4-week review session. And so there's a great deal more that needs to be done to improve basic skills instruction and delivery. We're all real clear about that. As far as the enrollment management is your other question, and I would think that a local college would develop a plan for gradual and deliberative application of prerequisites only in perhaps a handful of classes 1 year. And what they would probably do is shift some of their FTE and perhaps offer a few more sections of basic skills. But also, it may not have that much of an impact because, remember, all those courses in the left-hand column that students can take. The students can be taking all of those classes. They don't necessarily have to immediately take the basic skills. I mean, the literature is showing us that it's better if they do start them immediately. But it's not going to do this huge shift of enrollment that some people have feared. I think it will be much more thoughtful and carefully planned out.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the mini public comment, and then we'll come back to the board to talk.
Okay, we have quite a few speakers that I'm going to ask that folks be very cognizant of our 3-minute rule. We do have a case where there are 2 speakers together, in which case you get 5 minutes, but we will be very strict on the 3-minute rule. First up is John Ayala from Los Amigos in Orange County.
I'd like to thank the Board of Governors for giving us this opportunity to speak. I represent Los Amigos of Orange County. I'm on the Los Amigos Education Committee. I'm a community member. I represent the community voice. I'm also the chairperson of the Los Amigos Latino Advisory Board for North Orange County Community College District. I'm the chairperson of that committee. And also a retired dean from Fullerton College, Library and Learning Resources, and the Study Abroad program. Also ran the TV station, media services, et cetera. So I do have some background, and before I was an administrator, I was the president of the Academic Senate of Long Beach City College from 1985 through 87, and I think I understand the shared governance process and what the Academic Senate is trying to do. And what we would like to do is in a cooperative mode rather than an adversarial mode. We'd like to hear the community's voice injected into this whole process. And to that end, we're wondering why we're going backwards in terms of looking at a process that was questioned before by the MALDEF suit in 1988, where Los Amigos was part of that suit, and MALDEF, of course, and other organizations were friends. We look at, as a looking backward, we want to look forward in terms of what we think should be creative and more progressive ways of looking at the problem. And we're not seeing that in this because, again, we see it as a reversion to a process that was not acceptable at the time. We, to that end, of course, put together a public hearing in Orange County at Fullerton College, and we deliberately did it at Fullerton College to make the point that this is where this was started and where we'd like it to end. We again had that public hearing. We had different sides of the question that were directed to. And I think we were trying to make a point, and we made that point, that we as a civic organization, as a public organization, needed to have a voice in the process and to maybe slow down the process or turn it around or find another process that's more creative and progressive, I think. And I think I will leave the rest of the conversation to my other colleagues who are also here to address the board on it. But I think, have made our point in terms of having our public hearing and putting forth our point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enrique Zuniga, also from Los Amigos of Orange County.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to. Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to come in here and bring out some of our concerns. Actually, I was employed for Fullerton College 25 years. I retired 11 years ago. I was a student. I was a counselor at the time when the MALDEF suit was filed and with co-plaintiff with the students. There's quite a few students that were complaining. And again, the reason they were complaining was because at that time what we had was the prerequisites. And when we had the prerequisites at that time, many of the students actually what we had was a placement test, but in reality it was an entrance exam. And why was it an entrance exam? Is because the students, when they took the test and they scored at a certain level, there was very few or no classes they could take, especially since we didn't have hardly any ESL classes. We're about the only community college that didn't have, also including with, I think it was a college of the Redwoods or somewhere, that didn't have an ESL program. And we did have just a very few classes. And so when the students would come in, especially the Latino students that were in the ESL programs, we had very little or nothing to offer them. So all they were doing was, actually wouldn't have any courses other than the few ESL classes, and not everybody could actually take classes because there wasn't enough classes. And that was why it was taking so long for many of the students to actually start getting into their program. Many times they just took 1 or 2 classes, and when they took those few classes, they went home, and when their parents asked them, well, what are you taking to this and this? Only a couple of classes. A lot of them were dropping out. And this was a fact, actually, that came out when we had some meetings there with the English department and so on. On our public hearing, Los Amigos, what it is actually it's a community-based organization. It's just regular community. There's no president, there's no secretary, no treasurer, no anything, no dues. And we've been meeting for over 30-some years now, every Wednesday. The only time we have missed is on if Christmas falls on a Wednesday, then we do not meet. And in that community meeting, it's actually people from all Orange County, not even just Orange County, but even people from LA County come. Most of all the representatives have been to those meetings. If you go there any week, any day, any Wednesday of the week, you will find their representatives, the congressmen, assemblymen. Not only that, we have board of supervisors. In other words, it's a community-based organization. Everybody goes there. We write the agenda on a chalkboard, and we follow through with every person that comes in and would like to put out their presentation. So we felt...
Mr. Moreno, please wrap up your comments.
Mr. Moreno? Yes.
Mr. Zuniga, sorry.
Okay. Anyway, what I would like to say is that going back to where we came from, it's not going to work. It hasn't worked. Are we actually going to keep tabs on the schools that they not continue doing what Fullerton was doing? And if we don't, every school is going to do their own thing, and actually what they're going to be doing is continuing rotating the students, just putting a wall on their educational system.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Jose Moreno, also of Los Amigos of Orange County.
Good afternoon. Wasn't sure to say good morning or afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I'm a member of Los Amigos, but also a professor of Latino Education and Policy Studies at Cal State Long Beach, and actually have the privilege to teach many of the wonderful transfer students that come through the system. So while we lament a lot of the things that may not be happening, I can certainly tell you the transfer students that get to us are of high quality and are excellent, excellent students. I also serve as the local school board for the Anaheim City School District, so my interest in these issues is from a K-16 pipeline, and certainly all of the issues that you've discussed this morning are relevant to all of us. One of the things that is clear for us is to at least let you know the context of our public hearing, which you'll receive a summary of in the coming weeks. The public hearing was established because of the concern that was raised to us. We did not know about this issue until May. We looked through the websites to find out more information. Unfortunately, we were not able to really get the substance of the deliberations until we called for a public hearing for ourselves to figure out and study the issue for ourselves in much the same way that you do. I believe you were all invited to the public hearing as well as Chancellor Scott, but unfortunately you were at your own retreat, I believe, in Riverside at the time, and we do appreciate that Marlene Garcia was there on behalf of the Chancellor. Just to let you know who was there at the public hearing on June 24th, we had over 120 persons who attended on a matter of 2 weeks' notice when they were alerted to this issue in reference to the issues that were raised at Fullerton College 25 years ago. Of those 120 persons, there were people from the community college districts locally, LULAC, MALDEF, students, local school board members, as well as local community college board members. We had 3 former academic senate presidents who were on panels. We had the current senate president, Jane Patton. We had the president and incoming chancellor of San Jose Evergreen College, Rita Cepeta, a very good friend to all of us and knowledgeable person. We had a former counselor of over 20 years from Santa Ana College, and we also had Marlene Garcia there to provide comments, as well as the director of Access and Equity from California Tomorrow. Just to give you a quick synopsis of the points of that day, it was not a polarizing conversation in any way. Indeed, folks appreciated that the Board of Governors has had a tremendous focus on student success, because for us, it's not simply student success, it's community success. A community college, when it's successful, provides a successful foundation for a community, economically, socially, and in civic engagement. So for us, it's not simply about student success, it's community success. That is why we're so engaged in this process with you. We also understand that and we agree that prerequisites are important, but the current proposal is vague for us. It leaves too many question marks for us. It basically deregulates the system. And for us, when you deregulate a system without having clear data of how this will be implemented and what the impacts will be through system-wide analysis, it raises a lot of concerns for us at a community level. When we are often left to our own devices, we don't often do the right thing. It's not a question of whether we have good people in our schools and our colleges as faculty, as administrators. It's whether left to our own devices, we always do the right thing. And if the MALDEF suit was anything, it suggests that we don't always do the right thing when left to our own devices. So our concern is, when we deregulate a system, do we have the appropriate controls to manage the equity and access concerns that are being raised today? Lastly, we did note a question.
Mr. Moreno, your 3 minutes are
okay. And I'll just conclude with urging you to keep asking your questions as a board to validate the data that you received, and lastly, what this policy proposal does is it subtracts the use of data and implements an additional qualitative data, and that's what you've not invested in as a system. Is you're investing in data systems, and now you're not going to allow us to use those to develop good sound education policy.
Thank you. Chancellor Scott would like to say something.
I would urge everyone, I understand the history of what's happened, but the important thing is to address the points that I think the Academic Senate President brought up of why the Academic Senate has proposed a policy. I remind you that this is not an action item, so we're quite willing to take input today, but it would be helpful, I think, to address not the history of what's happened 20 years ago, but to address actually the proposal that is in front of you, and that the Academic Senate has indicated that they're open to not only what their proposal is, but that it is in process, and they're quite open to listening to what you have to say.
Next is Sean DeMille, Vice President of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, President Malumed, Chancellor Scott, and members. I'm Sean DeMille, Vice President for the Student Center for California Community Colleges. We have supported this by resolution at our fall assembly in 2009. We supported the Academic Senate's efforts. We've been a member of the prerequisite task force with the Academic Senate. We think that it is time for a change, and that it's a complicated issue, and we know that it's a complicated issue. Students shouldn't be denied the right to a class, but at the same time, we shouldn't be setting people up for failure. So there's many more conversations that obviously need to go on, and I know that it's a very complex issue, and we've been dealing with it. This originally was set out in 2007 to start working on this process, and we're in 2010 now, so it's obviously an evolving process, and we look forward to being of any help. I personally sit on as a student representative at the curriculum committee at Los Medanos College, my home school, and we deal with prerequisites all the time, and the issue about prerequisites is that when these students are what's happening is they're putting on as like advisories, like, well, maybe you should take this class, but that advisory just means exactly what it means, an advisory. And, and we're setting people up because, I talk to students all the time. They say, oh, well, I'm going to take this class. They're just out of high school. They've taken an assessment and they've tested into 2 levels below transfer English. And I suggest to them, that's a really writing and reading intensive course. I don't know if you would do well in that course. It might be better to start with English. And I think, and counselors do the same. And I think that those conversations are good, but I think that having something on a piece of paper for those of us who just kind of like look at the paper, and I was one of those people who just kind of, when I first started at college, just got the catalog and just started going, oh, that looks like a good course. I'll take that one. I'll take that one. I'll take that one. And that's not what we want. And I think that there needs to be sequencing. And I think that the academic sentence plan is very important, and they've got a lot of things, and that they're willing to work with us on further conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Audrey Yamagata Noji, who is the Vice President of Student Services from Mount San Antonio College.
Thank you very much. Certainly this is a critical issue facing all of us, and I wanted to indulge your time for a few moments to respond to the proposal put forward by the task force and the Academic Senate. We all want to do the best for our students, but it is very, very complex. My major point is that, in my belief, having worked on the Title V regulations that were originally established, that those actually serve us fairly well. The current proposal is to reshape that and take away the statistical-based validations and move to a faculty content review only, or certainly in place of. Now, clearly, the faculty are the content experts. They know about their discipline areas, and they certainly want students who are prepared to succeed in their classes. There may be a temptation to have a homogeneous student population that are all kind of at the same level. Our challenge, as you know, is we have a diverse population of students and diverse learners who come from many backgrounds. I firmly believe that the regulations that are in place now allow you to do what's been suggested by literature and by other experts. You can mandate orientation. You can put your resources towards advising and counseling students appropriately. You can have validated prerequisites, whether it's across the board, for example, a writing or reading prerequisite across the board, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes a clearly holistic approach in which you are clearly measuring the impact of any policies on all student groups. I can speak to that because at Mount San Antonio College we have this kind of a program in place, working within the existing regulations, monitoring at all times disproportionate impact to make sure our students are successful, that orientation is required, that they are aware of their placement levels, and that there is careful planning. The fear right now is that, is there enough technical expertise to make this policy change successful? Can we work within the existing regulations to correct what's been described as an onerous process to make it more amenable to local colleges? The training is absolutely critical, but we need to look at who's going to be able to do that. And the oversight is also something difficult. Right now, we're asking colleges to do a lot more with a lot less. Our concern from Student Services is clearly that a key element to the success of any of these proposals is the way we counsel and advise our students. At the same time, we're dealing with a tremendous negative budget reduction to matriculation services. So I know that you don't have a lot of time to hear my entire report, but I will provide you written comments.
Thank you. Alfonso Alvarez from America 61 Forum.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Alfonso Alvarez, and I'm here representing the American GI Forum of the United States. The American GI Forum is the largest and oldest Chicano, Latino, Hispanic war veterans organization in the United States. Our motto is education is our freedom, and freedom should be everybody's business. And veterans are also students at the community college. I am here today to express concern regarding the proposed Title V regulation changes pertaining to prerequisites. Our biggest concern is regarding the unintended consequences of this proposal. This proposal seeks to rid the statistical validation process, and even in the paper provided by Nancy Schola, she mentions that this issue cannot be resolved on the basis of available data. So there is, it has been identified that there is a lack of data. We want to be part of the solution. As a veterans organization, we value our rights as Americans to live our lives with our families free of institutional racism, institutional discrimination, and institutional prejudice. We believe that education is the key to success. We acknowledge that there are problems in the higher education system, and we acknowledge that we have to do something to improve our education system. But we are firm in our position that we will intervene if we feel that the proposed changes will increase the institutional push-out rate of minorities, and we will intervene if we feel that our right to equal access to education is compromised or hindered. I understand the logic behind the proposed changes to Title V regulations, but there are other things that we can do and that we should consider, and most importantly, I believe that we need to continue engaging in dialogue. My colleagues from the Los Amigos Education Committee have recommendations which should be considered, and in the near future, they will be forwarding those to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ann Price with California Tomorrow, a nonprofit equity education organization.
Good afternoon. I'm going to echo many of the previous speakers about our concern about the proposed regulatory changes and its impact on students of color in particular. Our major concern really is what are the unintended consequences that may result from the proposal. There could be many. I want to highlight a couple. One is that the proposal could create a bottleneck effect. We really don't know by rationing collegiate courses to those who we think that will be the most likely to succeed, what impact that will have on basic skills. Our concern is that it could result in unnecessary credit accumulation if we're actually funneling students into classes that they don't need to help them move forward, and that don't take them anywhere, or they can't get into those courses. One other area that we're concerned about is the potential negative impact on student financial aid packages. Certainly, this proposal could have the impact of keeping students in school longer. What will that mean, for example, for students who are receiving Pell Grant B? Could they possibly exhaust their grant early on, crippling perhaps their chances at success once they transfer? What we would really like to see is just more rigorous data and research, and why this proposal could actually serve us better than our existing regulations. We think at the very core of what we need to do is to think about how adults learn, to revision basic skills, and to elevate approaches that we know are working, like acceleration, like contextualized learning, and to assess if this proposal helps support those approaches or perhaps derails them. Secondly, we need to think about making sure that we don't collect data at the back end. We can't wait 2 to 3 years to find out if this has had disproportionate impacts on certain students. We need to have a better understanding of what that potential could be up front. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Collins from the Career Ladders Project.
Thank you. I know you're probably hungry. I know I'm getting that way. I'll try to be really quick. I'm from the Career Ladders Project. Actually, we were established by the Board of Governors and the System Office in 2002, but we're under the Foundation for California Community Colleges and raise philanthropic money to support career pathway development in the colleges statewide. I wanted to say that right now, given that this subject is up, this is an excellent moment for us to widen the dialogue and the discussion and really take on, I think, the issue that Jane rightly raised around the basic skills sequence. There's a lot that we could agree on, and one of those is that we have trouble with our basic skills sequence. If the board decides to make more students potentially be referred to those basic skills, English and math classes, as a result of making it easier to do the content validation rather than statistical validation. We probably ought to also be asking at the same time, if they go there, will they survive? Will they succeed? Do those classes prepare them for collegiate experience? And I think that there's some gathering information and data that's coming both from this state and other states, which really raises profound questions about the basic skills sequence. One is, for example, a large-scale study in Florida and Texas by the Community College Research Center, which actually found that there was no evidence that students taking remedial reading or math were any more likely to earn a degree than comparable students who skipped the sequence and went straight into academic classes. A similar study in Virginia said that students there who were comparably placed did just as well in college-level courses if they skipped the remediation altogether. So there's some real contrary information going on. What's happening? We know in our system, for those that are placed in remedial math, once they're placed there, only 10% of them ever get to a college-level class. And for the English, the comparable figure is 25%. So if we put them over there, we really need to then also take responsibility for what happens to them there. And I would really urge the board to think about, for example, the contextualized teaching and learning that's been talked about. Chuck Wisely from the Chancellor's Office, doing a large-scale study, I think he used some 12,000 student records, found that students in contextualized developmental math were 327% more likely to pass that than a student in a comparable traditional treatment of developmental math. And interestingly, he also found that they were 400% more likely to also pass in the same semester, at the same time, a transfer level class. Whoa, what's going on? These are things we really need to learn more about. He also found that that persisted into the next semester. You have some really interesting innovations all over the state, certainly your own career advancement academies that use contextualized learning to accelerate, require students to be in both college level and remedial classes or basic skills at the same time. I would urge you, whatever you do, don't preclude those innovations, but think very carefully about how to address the basic skills now that it's been raised. Thanks so much.
Jeanette Zana-Patton, Legislative Staff Attorney for MALDEF.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jeanette Zana-Patton with MALDEF. I won't go back into the history of the lawsuit, but I do understand that there are a lot of misperceptions about what happened with the lawsuit and subsequently what happened with the out-of-court settlement. So I do have a letter that I can deliver to everybody today. I'll leave with the secretary. Just a couple of quick points. One of MALDEF's primary role is to really take a look at what's going on with this proposed policy and really just look at how the policy is going to impact the students that we're concerned about, which is obviously students of color and students who are Latino and students who are limited English proficient. So we have not taken a position on the policy, but we do want to ensure that the process is slowed down a bit. I do want to reiterate some of the statements that were said earlier in terms of ensuring that there are community voices. As a professional courtesy, extend to MALDEF the opportunity to work with you on this issue, since this is an issue that we have some expertise around and definitely litigated this case back in the 80s. And so I just want to make sure that what's being said today is being taken seriously, that there are some concerns in the community, that a lot of us want to be part of the process, and that we want to really re-examine sort of where this policy is taking our students and in what direction, and to ensure that our students are going to be able to succeed, in the community college system and subsequently at a four-year institution. So we do have a couple of concerns that I want to raise and just kind of leave you with that. Have current practices been sufficiently analyzed to determine that the proposed changes will increase student success? Will a content review analysis be sufficient to determine whether the prerequisite is necessary for students to succeed in subsequent coursework? What other practices or policies are being considered to improve student outcomes, such as increased access to counseling? How will the impact of the proposed changes on student success be measured? What impact will these changes have on minority students and Latino students in particular? Will the proposal lead to the abandonment of the most underprepared students in our system? What remedies will be available to students who will not be able to satisfy the revised prerequisite standards? And how will practices under the revised regulations be monitored to ensure that they do not produce a disparate impact? And so, once again, we really just ask that the process be slowed, that more folks be brought to the table to really take back and look at this issue and really look at the data that's out there and allow us the time to do the research so that we know what impact this is going to have on our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two speakers. Again, for two speakers, you're allowed 5 minutes. Michelle Barton from Palomar College and Kenneth Meehan from Fullerton College.
We're going to split ourselves.
They split us up. Okay, let's sit down. Let's see here. I'm short, so sometimes when I sit in chairs, I go real far down, but I'm very pleased that this table and this chair wasn't built for just tall people. Anyways, I want to thank you all for allowing us to come and speak and provide our perspective on the proposed Title V changes. I'm Michelle Barton. I'm Director of Institutional Research and Planning at Palomar College, and I'm the current RP Group President as of July 1st. So this has been real fun for me to begin my tenure there. Dr. Ken Meehan is the Director of Research at Fullerton, and he is a past president of the RP Group. The RP Group, the Executive Committee, has requested that I read to you a brief. I have copies of the brief that we can also hand out. This brief addresses the RP Group's concerns with the current proposal to modify Title V to establish permissive language related to statistical validation of proposed prerequisites. This paper also provides a framework for a comprehensive approach to the issue of prerequisites and their impact upon the development of education sequences in our college. Responding to the June 16, 2010 letter from Vice Chancellor Barry Russell related to the prerequisite update requesting feedback, the RP Group offers some comments on the proposed change to Title V, California Code of Regulations, Section 5503, Policies for Prerequisites, Co-requisites, and Advisories on Recommended Preparation. The proposed changes to the process of establishing prerequisites would eliminate the requirement that prerequisites be statistically validated to meet professional standards and instead make statistical validation permissive. The proposed change to Title V is based upon the arguments contained in the Academic Senate's report, Prerequisite Rungs on the Ladder to Success. Recently, we in the RP Group had the opportunity to discuss our concerns with the leadership of the Academic Senate, and we have found many areas of agreement. We support many of the core concepts contained in the Academic Senate report, especially the idea of faculty utilizing content review as part of a reflection process to improve upon college curricular sequences. However, we do not agree with the proposal to make statistical validation of prerequisites permissive, replacing the current language that requires it, but we also believe there are viable alternatives all parties can support. The RP Group is concerned that the current debate about Title V changes will create a polarization among stakeholders at a moment in time where we have an important opportunity to promote higher levels of student success. We think there is a common ground for all stakeholders in this conversation, and we believe the Academic Senate shares our perspectives. Our starting point, like the Academic Senate and other stakeholders within and outside the community college system, is our commitment to increase student success in our colleges. We think the Academic Senate report is a good starting point for a broader discussion about the community college curriculum, especially the developmental education sequences. The arguments in this report and then the recommendation for revising Title V, however, addresses only one issue, that of allowing college curriculum committees to rely primarily on content review. It does not address other issues of viability of the college's developmental education sequence and the huge number of students who fail to complete that sequence, especially significant students of color. There are a number of significant questions that we wish to address. Is content review without statistical validation an adequate response to the challenge of building clear and straightforward curricular pathways for students to achieve their educational goals. Content review alone, without statistical validation to determine prerequisite courses, will make student pathways even more complex and difficult to navigate, and will not ensure students will reach their education goals, especially for students in the developmental education sequences. There are a number of reasons for this. There's extensive empirical evidence from large studies in Texas and California, which my colleague presented, as well as studies in California community colleges that raise fundamental questions about the relevance of developmental education requirements for success in college-level courses, and thus whether prerequisites can actually promote higher levels of student success. 2, without statistical validation of prerequisites, it is virtually impossible to demonstrate that the establishment of prerequisites leads to an improvement in student success. The patterns of correlations between placement or enrollment levels of the development education sequence and success rates in general education courses do not necessarily point to the skills and knowledge represented in the developmental education courses as the causal agent in the variation of the success rates. 3, student placements in a particular course serves as a proxy for a whole host of student characteristics, including inter alia high school experience, first-generation college-going, English language learning, motivation, economic opportunity, and college persistence. There is, for example, a relationship between placement or concurrent enrollments in levels of developmental mathematics education and success in general education courses, even when there is no relationship between the content of the
Ms.
mathematics
Spartan,
course and the general education.
You'll need to wrap up.
Sure. So basically what we are suggesting is we are hoping that the Academic Senate's initiative for more faculty reflection about student success, we advocate using many sources of evidence, including course outlines and syllabi, other instructional artifacts, data from learning assessments, course program at an institutional level, and statistical data on student placement and course success rates. We have a recommendation where we are requesting...
Ms. Spartan?
Yes.
Ms. Spartan, I'm sorry,
Okay.
your time is up.
I'll hand you out the paper, but we do have a recommendation on how we could reach common ground.
If you could give it to Jerry, that would be
There, thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Next up, Scott Lay from the Community College League.
The League does not have a position on the particular recommendation of the Academic Senate, although we do buy into the concept that we rely primarily on this as an academic professional matter of the Academic Senate. I know that their intention is not that we go back to the darkest days that many of you reminded me of, or reminded us of today. I'm not sure, however, that we know where we're going as a system. And that's, I think, the more important question, and this is one of many elements that needs to be part of that discussion. In September, we will release a report of the Commission on the Future. It addresses several areas, not prerequisites specifically, but really moving beyond this optional, part-time, voluntary enrollment system that we have for our community colleges that just doesn't work for the vast majority of our students. It's time for us to recognize that we have funding models and regulations that are sequence-based, Carnegie unit-based, some things we can do without, some things we can't, really based on Western European higher educational models that just don't work for students that are presenting high school diplomas that are not at college level. And so much of what you've heard about today in terms of accelerated, contextualized learning, as well as creating incentives for our colleges to serve English language learners and first-generation college students. There's no incentive right now other than a moral incentive to do so. Perhaps something that we should put on the table is ensure that people don't believe that somebody's going to be left behind if we change prerequisites, whether on a content basis or on a statistically valid basis. Many of our colleges went to a compressed calendar in the last few years. We took 5-day-a-week classes and we crammed them into 2-day-a-week, but there is not much statistical work being done to find out what that means from an academic basis going forward. I think it's a time for us to reopen and look at what we are delivering to our students, how we are delivering to our students, and the financial and regulatory constructs in which our colleges are forced to operate. It may be time for us to say that 2.9 million students is too many for us to do a quality job with available state funding. Maybe we need to be a smaller system. Let's talk going forward about what it is that we'd like to see from the outcomes, and then I think a lot of these other pieces, I think, will fit into that construct. So thank you very much, and thank you for the Academic Senate, as well as the advocates we've heard from today that haven't necessarily been part of the discussions we've had over the last couple of years. Let's not make today a one-time dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Pater with the Student Senate.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Alex Pater. I'm currently the president of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. The Student Senate is dedicated to improving student success and guarantee that all students have the preparation needed in order to succeed and fulfill all of their educational goals. Our resolution in fall '09 supported a pilot program in conjunction with supporting the efforts of the Academic Senate in reforming prerequisites. While the Student Senate is committed to student success and promoting prereq reform, we are not willing to compromise equity and diversity for improving completion rates. The SSCCC is committed and looks forward to participating in this ongoing conversation. And thank you again.
Thank you. Michelle Pilati, ASCCC. And I'm not sure what that stands for.
Good afternoon. I'm here as Vice President of the Academic Senate and somebody who's been involved in these conversations from the very beginning. And the really good news is we have yet to hear a concern that we haven't already talked about extensively. And what I see happening here is this is one of those things that's so complicated, the devil is in the details. And what a local implementation plan would look like is what people really need to get a better idea of, and what we've been talking about, and we probably haven't communicated as clearly as we should, because that really is where it comes down to. What are you going to do to ensure that there are places for all those students? I remember about 8 years ago asking why we didn't make sure students had the course that teaches them how to read a college-level textbook or that level of skill before we had them in our transfer-level classes. And our VP at the time said, well, we couldn't possibly offer enough sections. And then I would be faced with students who truly could not read the textbook or even read a sentence on a piece of paper and are trying to succeed in a college-level course, and who got that seat in that class at the expense of a student, possibly at the expense of a student who may have had a better chance at succeeding. So that's sort of a big part of it. Our students are not succeeding. We want them to succeed. And I guess I'm the first, well, besides Jane, the first one who actually teaches in community colleges right now to speak. We have this incredible range of students. We have students who did not go to high school, and we have students who are ready for UC, all in the same classroom. And there's probably 75% of them that we can help get through, but then there's another percentage that no matter what we do, they're not going to make it through the class. And what we want to do is signal to them that they need to get the skills before they come into our courses so that they get through the first time. We've had lots of conversation and concerns about repetition and withdrawal and how many times students can repeat and how many times they can withdraw. And our student services folks are very strong advocates for that, because there are students who are getting into courses before they're ready, needing to repeat, needing to withdraw, and so forth. So it's really about sort of switching the conversation so that we're looking at getting students through the first time. And we're not talking about throwing out statistics and throwing out validation. We're talking about let us put prerequisites in place where appropriate and then see what happens. And at that point, we can change if we are not increasing student success as we are predicting we will. So the idea, there's, validation is not gone completely. It's just looking at it a different way and really holding faculty accountable for teaching their courses the way they should be teaching our courses as those courses as truly comparable to the UC and the CSU where we send our students. At the UC and CSU, they don't have prerequisites across the board. They don't have to. They have admissions requirements. So they effectively have prerequisites that we don't have. Let's see, I had a whole bunch of things. It's really in our best interest to ensure student success, and that more than anything else is really what this is all about. And we're all concerned about disproportionate impact. We do not want to limit the opportunities for any students. And I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Mahone, with the Academic Senate.
Like Michelle, I'm also a faculty member in a California community college. I'd like to make 2 brief points. A number of speakers have said we need more data, and I agree with them completely. I'm also very mindful of Michelle Barton's point that there are many factors that lead to students not being successful, but I want to reiterate data that the Board of Governors received in May that comes from DataMart and is data about our current students. Of those students who remain enrolled until the end of the semester but are not successful, that gap is, to the nearest whole number, about 12% for our Anglo and Asian students, 18% for Latino students, and 24% for African American students. Even if you reduce that gap by only half, that would lead to 500,000 additional successful course completions per year. The difference that would make for individual student GPAs and the promise of being able to go forward is significant. A second general point, and I want to add on what Scott Lay said. We don't know where the future lies, but in my 20 years in the California community colleges as a faculty member, and the 40 years since I began my education at a California community college, one of the greatest increases I have seen is the demand that our colleges become more productive, efficient, that we measure ourselves quantitatively and outcomes more rigorously. There are 3 ways to improve student outcome. One is that if colleges are told your funding depends on a 10% increase in student success, faculty have the capacity right now to do that. We simply award more passing grades where they are deserved and earned or not. Faculty don't want to go there. A second possibility, and this happens in the present to some degree, generally not with faculty enthusiastic support, but through enrollment management, you can simply fine-tune the sections that are available to students in a way that students more likely to be successful are admitted to the college in the first place. That is also not a place that faculty would like to see our colleges go. The third and only remaining option is that we do better by the students that we have, and we take them from wherever they are to the place that they want to be educationally. And as Jane said earlier in her presentation, I don't think any faculty member believes that changing prerequisites alone can do that, but it is a crucial tool among many that have been spoken about today that faculty need to have at their disposal. Will it work perfectly? We can't promise that, but the status quo is not working anything like perfectly. We're very sympathetic to desires to see us monitor, measure, and make sure that we avoid unintended consequences, but this is a path we have to go down. The other 2 are much less appealing. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel Richards, a student, looks like, at Long Beach Community College.
Good afternoon, President Mohamed and Chancellor Scott and members. Yes, I am a current student at Long Beach City College. I'm a former student with my liberal arts associate's degree from LA Harbor College. And not only am I a student leader currently at the state level, I'm not here to testify in regards to that. I'm here to testify regarding my personal experience in regards to this. I certainly wish that the structure was in place back when I first started in the community colleges as a returning student. Due to the fact that the lack of structure that I experienced is I took a whole year that I felt like it was a waste of my time because there was not that structure. And at the time, I was an AB 540 student because I was not a U.S. citizen yet. And it was very expensive for me, and it was very discouraging to take classes that I just didn't quite understand what it was doing or what purpose it served in regards to my interest as a nursing major. Currently, I have a major and 2 minors that I'm working on, but had I had a greater structure to follow, I believe that I could have saved myself a year of expenses and wasted time.
Great. Thank you. Madam President, that concludes public testimony.
Well, thank you, everybody from the public. You added a lot of depth to this discussion. Are there any comments or questions from our board members? Oh, thank you. Member Perez and Member McDougall.
I just have a question that probably cannot be answered, but to try to understand the magnitude of the problem, if you could put back up on the screen, you had a chart of what should happen and what can happen, which really, I think, was intended to pose the problem that we have under what can happen. And my assumption is that what should happen is the ideal. Now, my understanding further is that those students who go through the matriculation process, testing, are going through what should happen. Do we have any sense of the relative magnitude of the students in both of those cells, particularly, and a differentiation in cell number 2, what can happen of those who are taking 6 units or less, and those who are taking 7 to 11 units, i.e. who are not full-time? I think that would be helpful if the data are available, just to get a sense of the magnitude of the problem we're addressing.
Member Paris.
I want to thank everybody for their comments today and the Academic Senate for bringing forward this item as a topic for discussion. I know the previous board has discussed this in depth. We are basically a newly formed board. It is our first time really having discussion on this. And, you know, for myself, I would like to ensure that we give this adequate time for discussion and we don't try to rush to a vote. I think everyone that I heard today is all focused on the same thing, and it's student success. I mean, everybody here was talking passionately about the success of our students, and to make sure that we're also providing assistance for our underprepared students. With that, I do believe, Jane, you said, it's a multi-pronged approach that is needed. And what I'm hearing is that if we implement this alone without looking at these other areas and ensuring that we have the basic skills, that we have this system laid out of what can happen versus what should happen, we need to focus on this and ensure ways to make certain that this is going to be a pattern across the state. Part of my concern is that it's a localized level effort, and on a localized level effort, we have no way of determining what those steps are going to be. We've heard today that some of the colleges have very effectively addressed this, and they have processes in place today, so there are best practices out there. I think there's an opportunity here to discuss what those best practices are and to incorporate those into the recommendation, opposed to just having the recommendation focus only on looking at the prerequisite portion of the class and looking at that in isolation. I also feel that data is extremely important, and I do have concerns about looking at data on the back end and not having a benchmark as a starting point to begin with. It is critical that you have to know where you're starting from in order to determine where you're going and whether or not you are achieving the success that you're ultimately looking to achieve. So with that, I would just request that I think this is supposed to come back to us at our next meeting as an item for a vote. I would strongly suggest that this does not come back as a vote. I understand that you guys are actually making some recommendations based on feedback that you received, that it comes back to us as further discussion, and we do not try to push a vote, but really do the adequate due diligence that this topic deserves.
Member Davis-Lyman.
I think one thing that's very clear today, that the message from many of the speakers was that we need, and I think California Tomorrow just nailed it, we need more rigorous data. And we need to know what are the negative impacts, what are the positive impacts on our students. We need some data that will allow us to have that conversation in a deeper manner, and I don't think that can happen within the next 2 months, that this data that can support a decision with the magnitude that this leads to, the other decisions. You know, what are the consequences? I think Scott Lay said it. We're not sure where we're going with this, but it's very important, I think, that we have very strong evidence and data, and that's going to take more time. We have to be more pointed in what it is we really want to look at as a board to make a decision that is going to affect this, our whole system and the success of our students. And I would piggyback on exactly what Board Member Perez said, there isn't a person in this room that does not care about the success of our students. That's the one thing everybody has in common. But I'd like to see us get the data that we need to make this very serious decision.
Executive Vice Chancellor Bruckman.
Just a point of clarification. At the previous meeting, this was presented as a first reading. There may be some thought that this could come back for a second reading at the next meeting. That would not be possible because there will be changes to the regulation. So the next step, if there was a next step, would be a first reading and then a second reading subsequently. So there would, at the earliest, the vote would be November. But so I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Member Baca.
Yes, just very quickly, I want to thank the Academic Senate, Jane and Michelle, for the work that they've continued to do on this very important matter. And of course, all of the speakers today, you provided great input and insight, and I think it was done really in the best interest of our students. I'm just going to leave it at this. I do have some comments, and I'll be making those in the future, but most of our students are doing just fine. But we do have a significant number that are not, and we need to deal with that. And you know, whether we deal it with one strategy or another, we have to work through that. But the fact is that we do have an issue that confronts us, and so we have to work to it to resolve it as best as we can. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Member Ramos.
I confess that I'm thinking out loud in relationship to all the information that we've received, and this is a new topic for me to be trying to absorb. But I think the evidence and research piece is obviously central. But I'm also, as a practical matter, somewhat dubious that we can know the things that we need to know before the fact. And I would just encourage some flexibility in thinking about piloting different efforts that might be reinforced by available research, however imperfect it may be, testing and assessing those as we go without assuming that we have to impose a singular decision on the entire system on the basis of so little information in such a short period of time. It's just a thought. I hope that's something that the people who are on the ground can consider. And if it's practical to come back to us with a couple of options that we can test over a reasonable period of time over the next, say, 3-5 years, that seems to me to be probably a much more realistic way to get to the best place at the lowest level of risk in terms of resources and the opportunity for mistake that could be catastrophic if we get it wrong.
Good thoughts. Well, I feel comfortable continuing to keep this as an information and report item for our next meeting and for you to give us more information, and we'll be reading all these reports that people are going to give us. So if the board feels comfortable with that, we will not make it a first reading at our next meeting, but continue the discussion.
Good idea.
Sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.